Who knew that the devil wore a red silk dress? Yeah, she always in some mess. She more petty than the rest. Heartbreaker. Yeah, I call her heartbreaker. She took off with my money, stole all my jewelry. Yeah, she even took.
Hey, I don't know what happened, but good to see you. And so this is the Melvin Live Show. I just have a few things to say to you here today. One is that I've been doing some thinking about this show and how and where this show is going, and I have some thoughts, and I just want to very fairly quickly share with you. Um, the thoughts behind that essentially is that I want to be able to really put out content that it's about you and it's not going to be about me. So that's all I can say at this point in time, but essentially that's what I've been thinking. Um, I don't know what happened today, but the HDMI cable that I was using was seems to be having some kind of issue. We'll get that fixed, right? So in any case, welcome to the Melvin Live Show. And in this show itself, we talked about the mindset, skill set, and tool set of building a digital business. Now, this whole idea with the digital business is that it's a one person, 1 million all digital business. And why digital business is because at the end of the day, I think many of us would need to find our relevance in the digital world. And when we talk about finding our relevance, one of the key things that we must have is actually a strategy. Now, but before we go into the strategy part and how do you come up with the strategy itself, I think it's worthwhile looking at what exactly it's a strategy. So when we talk about strategy, the best way to think about strategy is choices. So to give you a bit of a background, I've been in strategy for many, many years. In fact, when I graduated, my first job was in planning and research. And one of the key things that I do on a daily basis is I read a ton of policy papers. And my role primarily was to synthesize all this information and present what it means to the senior management. And the senior management would then decide what Singapore should do with regards to the policies for the small and medium sized enterprises. And there was working in that context itself. And afterwards, when I left the civil service, I actually went into dealing with writing business plans for small and medium sized enterprises. And that led me to take on the consulting role for SMEs before I moved into consulting for schools, and now of course doing far more training in terms of strategic thinking as well as leadership. And so when it comes to strategy itself, I think the easiest way or best way to think about that is it's a set of choices that you make. So, in a very simplistic way, basically, it's if you have, if you're faced with this particular situation, you need to be able to come up with the number of choices that you have. Should I do A, B, or C? And what we typically would tell our clients is when you think about strategy, it's about choices. So your strategy cannot be, this is what I'm going to do, right? Because if you only have one option, only one choice, then that is not a strategy. That is what we call you have an ultimatum. That means it's either you do this or you die. So that is not a strategy because strategy involves evaluating choices. So then clients would ask us, well, what if I come up with two choices, right? I mean, you say one is an ultimatum, two is a dilemma because you are only faced with two situations and you can either do this or this. And so when I guide organizations and companies in developing their strategy, to thinking about strategy, the first thing I get them to embrace is that when you are faced with a particular situation, you always must come up with at least three different choices. Now, why three and not one and two? Because if it's just one choice, then really you have no choice. And that is what we call an ultimatum. And if you have two choices, it seems like you have either option A or option B. But in reality, what you have is a dilemma. It's either you do this or you do that. What we want to do is to come up with three or more choices that will enable us to decide how we want to move forward. So the first thing really is strategy is about choices. Now, once you have the choices, then you can decide which of these options you're going to take. And so more often than not, when we advise organizations about strategy, first we get them to come up with the choices, then we help them form a decision criteria to pick which choice they want to grab and run with it. And so that's the definition of a strategy. I know if you read many of those Harvard Business Review or those academic books, they may come up with very, very fancy or even sophisticated or even very cliche type of definition. I read many of these books, and what I firmly believe here is that strategy is about choices. So that's part one itself. Now, the other thing that I want to touch today before we because this is going to take several episodes before we can complete this, because how to formulate strategy is actually, I wouldn't say a fairly complicated, but it is something that you can learn, and it's something that you can do it in a more structured manner. And so before we go into like how we're going to do this strategy thing, I would like to share with you this idea about the elements of strategy. So when we talk about elements of strategy, in other words, what you want to see is what are the things that make up this thing called strategy, right? What is all this thing that makes up this whole idea of what is called strategy? And I like this four elements of what goes into the strategy itself. And I want to take some time to explain this to you in this video. In any case, if you have not subscribed to my channel, these are the things that I will be sharing with you. And I will also be equipping you with the know how to build a digital business. And so, if you want to build a digital business, then definitely you want to subscribe, because I will be sharing and going forward, I'm just going to be sharing more of such information. And this is going to be actionable advice. It's not just, knowing what it is, but knowing what it is and what to do with what you know. All right. So let's get into this. Now, the elements of strategy itself, I like to see as the four P's. And so this four P's, something that in my experience of advising organizations and schools and companies, these are the four elements that I would always tell my clients that, that these are the things that you need to take into consideration, right? So the first one is what we call the Pareto Principle. Now, what exactly is the Pareto Principle? You probably have come across this thing called an 80-20 rule. So the 80-20 rule talks about 20% of the effort would brings you 80% of the results. 20% of your time spent doing something, it's going to determine 80% of the results that you get at the end of the day. 20% of the clients contribute to 80% of your revenue. 20% of the population, it's going to contribute to the economy of that country, contribute 80% of the GDP to that country. And so the Pareto principle is actually name of this guy called Pareto. And so this is what he came up with. Now, one way to think about Pareto principle is actually the word leverage. Now, here's one thing that I like to say. Here in Singapore, many people like to say leverage on. There is no such thing as leverage on. It's just leverage, right? So no leverage on my knowledge. No, 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 no. It's just leverage. Okay. Now that aside, Pareto principle is about leverage. And what exactly is leverage? Leverage essentially means that you put in a small amount of effort, but it gives you the desired result. So when you think about strategy, if your strategy is doesn't have the element of the Pareto principle, then your strategy it's probably not optimal. It is not good. So what you want to think about is when you are thinking about a strategy, it's gotta it's gotta give you that 20%. You gotta put in that 20% of the effort, and it's gotta give you 80% of the result. So as an example, I was talking to this guy who is the CEO of a startup, and he was just sharing with me what he was going to do, and I was sharing with him that if you're going to do that, you are going to invest a lot of time, money, and resources into pursuing this particular end goal itself. However, if you flip it around, you will be able to achieve maybe if the maybe the same amount of results or probably even more if you just flip it around. And so many a times people will think that, oh, this is something that we should do, and hence that's why it's this is our strategy. No, it's not. All right. So it has to fulfill the Pareto principle, 80-20 rule. Now, the second element of a strategy, and I should actually add that is a good strategy, is what I call planetary. Now, planetary, it's a way of looking at whatever strategy you have. At the end of the day, it revolves around the customer because at the end of the day, at the end of the business day, if you do not have a paying customer, you do not have a business. You can talk about philosophy and culture and values and vision and mission all you want. But if you do not have a paying customer, you do not have a business. And so whatever strategy you have revolves around the customer. Because if you're able to nurture, fulfill, meet the needs, and even anticipate the need of your customer, then very well you would have the ability to retain the customer and even earn new ones. And so it revolves around the customer, but there are many different layers of things. So just like the solar system, right? You have the sun at the center of the universe itself, and then you have all this planet that's kind of revolving around it. And every planet has its pathway, and it doesn't cross with another planet. And there is a sequence in terms of the planet. The planet doesn't change position. So there are certain rules, certain principles to go by. So to give you an example, obviously we do not have time to go deep into this, but what I do is I'm going to open up my the opportunity for you to participate as a patron, and as a patron itself, I will go deeper into all this content that I'm sharing here. I will announce that sometime in October, where I have most of the things in place. All right. So if you think about the planetary, is that you have the center of the universe, which is the sun, and then you have all these different planets. Now, the key thing here is that each planet has got its own features and uniqueness, right? And no one planet is trying to be like another planet. And and so if you think about the customer itself, at the end of the day, your company, your business have to provide a product or a service that add value to the customer. So adding value could be something as dramatic as you know, after the customer go through with you, he or she would be able to achieve the breakthrough, right? Or it can be something as simple that at the end of the day, when you provide this product or service to your customer, the customer is just satisfied. So think of any business, right? Any business, you have a customer, and what you want to do is to be able to provide the need of the customer. Because if you can't, the customer will go somewhere else, especially if what you're offering is highly substitutable. So at one level, it's the product. How does the product value add to the customer? And then, of course, if you go down one more layer, the product that add value to the customer, the next layer of it is the people, the people that you have, the people in your business that it's producing this product or service to satisfy the need of the customer. So, and then it goes on, right? And so there are certain things that are closer to the customer and there are certain things that are further away from the customer. So planetary. Next is perspective. Now, perspective is key because at the end of the day, when you're talking about strategy, if your strategy is doing what everybody else is doing, then obviously, there isn't going to be very much of a differentiation. And you will end up being a Me Too company or a Me Too brand. And so, what you really want to do at the end of the day is to be able to see what others can't see or won't or refuse to see. So, to give you an example, the pandemic has really caused a lot of people to rethink and reevaluate the perspective. Now, there are some people who can clearly see what's happening, like yourself, I believe. There are some people who refuses to see what's happening, and there are some people who just cannot see. And so, what you want to do is that when the strategies that you come up with has to be something that is unique, something that is different. And by being different itself, it's because you have a different perspective of things. That's how you're able to develop a different strategy, right? So that third one, it's perspective. The fourth one, it's play to win. And this is taken from the book that I love, and I will be sharing with you some of the key lessons from the book itself. Now, play to win is a fairly simple concept, but not many companies get it right. So most companies, what they do is they are looking at competing with another uh, company, with another competitor. So think of like, Apple versus Samsung as an example, right? One would see that in the initial stage, Samsung is probably a competitor because it's trying to one up on Apple, and so in that sense, it's always that race that you put in a 10 megapixel camera, I put in a 12, you put in a 12, I put in a 14, you put in a 14, I put and it goes on and on and on. Now, of course, at the end of the day, the consumer is the one that is going to benefit. But that said itself, I think there is a limit to what the consumer can benefit and or the consumer want, and the fact that you know at the end of the day there is just so much that you can do and so much you can squeeze out of your supplier itself. So at the end of the day, if your business strategy requires that someone has to lose in order for you to win, you can be rest assured that that strategy isn't going to be sustainable. And so here is where we talked about play to win. Now, play to win at various level. It's not just about being better than the competition. It's not even about a competition. It's about winning. It's about winning for everybody, the suppliers, your business, the customers, and probably even the competitors, right? Everybody wins. And so when you think about playing to win, at the end of the day, it's really talking about how everybody could win. And because this is an entire ecosystem itself, it's not going to be just you winning and somebody else losing. It's going to be multitude of wins itself. So I will always remember my mentor telling me that whatever strategies that you come up with, as long as if in order for you to win, someone else has to lose, then that strategy is not going to be sustainable. All right. Okay, so there you have it. This is part one of what is strategy, and I hope you gave you some idea of how to formulate strategy. So in the next episode itself, what we're going to be talking about is how do you go from now you understand what is strategy. Strategy is about choices. You know what are the elements that goes into the strategies, the 4 Ps, and then the next step is how do you formulate the strategy. And so if you got a different way of looking at strategy and defining the strategy, make sure you leave it in the comments below. I would like to know your definition and how do you come up with that definition itself, right? And if you want to continue to be informed when the next episode comes up, make sure you follow and you subscribe on YouTube or Facebook, depending on where you're watching this. And I'll be sure to um, alert you when the episode is out. All right. So with that, thank you so much. And this is the Melvin Live Show. Exciting things coming ahead, right? I can't wait to share with you at this point in time. But you take care, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.